For my highlights of round 6, I'd like to look at one match in particular, Cuba against Kazakhstan. I just thought it'd be very interesting to see, how one team managed to pull through. So I'm going to look at 3 of the games, and I'm going to start with Quesada against Kostienko. That was the first game to finish. I should say that both of these teams were actually leading at the start of the round. And, well, probably on paper, Cuba were the favourites. And, well, you've probably seen the results by now, but that certainly, well, the form book wasn't upset, let's just put it like that. So, first game, Quesada against Kostienko. Black had an early initiative, and you can see that there's pressure on the A file, but actually White has managed to contain this. So the A pawn is defended by 3 pieces, and White has just played F5. Now it's White's turn to attack on the king side, and this is extremely dangerous. Suddenly, if Black's pieces aren't breaking through, then you have to ask yourself, what are these pieces doing on the A file? Black thought he'd be creative here and played bishop h3. And obviously the bishop would like to take this pawn, but it's perhaps opening up the line of the queen to come down to f1 as well. Problem is that Black had overlooked a tactic, so rook takes bishop was played. Black thought that queen f1 check was winning a rook. Well, it does win a rook, but the problem is that after queen c1, of course, it allows a checkmate. So, back rank. There we go. Let's go back. So, basically in this position, Black had simply given away a piece, and after a few more moves, he resigned the game. Right, that was the first one to finish. Now let's move on to the next one, which was Aitbayev against Ortiz. So Ortiz playing for Cuba, and this was a Najdorf variation. Those of you who are regular viewers may well know that the Najdorf is one of my favourite variations with Black. And bishop e3 is an extremely popular way of meeting it. Now, many moves here. e5, e6, knight g4. These are the most popular moves. Ortiz played e6 and g4 from White. Very aggressive, a kind of Keres attack. h6, so holding up the advance. And this has been seen many times before. Now, Black played here a very daring continuation. Knight e5. Of course, White could play f4, but then the knight comes into c4 and the bishop has to retreat, so White wastes time. And then, well, Black might even follow up with an e5 at some point. So White played queen e2. Okay, this is pretty normal to cover the c4 square. And now there's a threat to play here. And Black played g5. Now, this looks extravagant. In fact, it's a very typical idea in the Najdorf. Of course, the g-pawn prevents White pushing the Black knight away with f4. So secures the e5 square for the knight. But, well, White can still open lines. So it's a daring move, but actually typical Najdorf move. And this strategy of Black's really carries through right from the start to the finish of the game, and as we'll see, proves to be very successful. Now, this is quite a long game. I haven't got time to go through all the moves, but let me just sketch out a few of the critical moments. So White does open lines, and the knight comes back. At the moment, Black's development looks very poor. Well, it is. The only thing black really has going for him is this central control over e5, so the knight retreats to support the knight here, and black has this shell of centre pawns which prevent white's knights from entering on these squares. That's extremely important. It looks as though white should be able to open lines further and somehow break through, but it's actually extremely difficult to do that. Now I'm going to leap ahead many moves. Black succeeded in castling on the queen side. Apologies if this is going too quickly for you. So black castled on the queen side, as did white. White has managed to secure a knight on f6, but you can see that black still has the centre under control. This is so important, and these knights hold black's position together, and black has managed to organise counterplay on the c front. In the meantime, because f7 is protected by the knight, then actually it's not clear what white is doing. Black found a very nice manoeuvre, bishop d8, and that brings the bishop round to exchange on the queen side. Actually, I don't like this manoeuvre of knights, although somehow this looks very impressive to support this knight. The problem is, well, the knight on h5 really doesn't do anything, and the knight on f6, it's kind of stuck there, it's not really doing much. And the real battleground, of course, is now the queen side. So let's see how this develops over the next few moves. So black basically switches his forces over to the queen side. There's a threat, there's a threat to take on c2. Okay, that was to defend the pawn on d6. And now the queen enters the action. And probably here, round about here, actually black could even play knight c4, and this is probably a winning move. After this, for example, and rook takes, and there probably isn't a really decent defence to this. But okay, black instead, I mean, I think this must have been time pressure. Black went into an endgame. Well, white offered the endgame, and black won a pawn. And, well, I'm going to leap ahead again. Well, I'm going to go forward to this position. So black has broken through. White did eventually manage to get this pawn on d6, but this rook is very active. These knights are still very poor, and white's king is actually very badly placed, as is so typical in these kind of Sicilian positions. And let's see how black attacked. So black still has control over e5 and is able to bring the other knight into play. Actually, black's king is completely safe. White protects the back rank, and now a3, great move. So actually black is weaving a mating net around white's king. That's nice. So taking control over the 7th rank. Now it's time to throw the knight into the fray. And in this position, white resigned. I think it's, well, it's all over. Of course, white could defend with rook here, but then, well, let me see. That's not a terrible move. There might well be other moves, but that looks pretty good. Followed by taking here, and, well, it really is all over. Beautiful game, worth playing through in more detail if you find time. And let me go to the last game I'm going to look at, which is Pavel Kotsur against Lazaro Bruthon. Bruthon representing Cuba, very strong player. You know, he's been at the top of Cuban chess along with Dominguez for many years. Bruthon has won an exchange. You can see that Bruthon has the black pieces. He has a rook against the bishop, but white has a pawn for it. And this passed pawn on d5 is pretty powerful. It needs blockading. At the moment, these rooks aren't really playing a very important role in the game, and this, I really liked Bruthon's next move. He gave a pawn away with this. Well, in a second he's going to give a pawn away. If this is taken like this, then queen takes is obviously extremely strong. So bishop takes was played, and now queen here. White is going to pick up this pawn, but the point of this move was simply to open up lines for the rooks. That's what they like, and let's see how this develops. Rook f8. This is excellent strategy. This is threatened, white defends it, but now look at the king. If the rooks can get in, then the king is going to be in trouble because there's no proper pawn cover. Rook c8, and now Bruthon sends the rooks round. Even this knight is not on a very stable square. So here's a little trick. Of course, if knight takes queen, then rook takes. Now you can see what danger the king is in. There's the threat of mate, and of course rook takes g3 as well. So queen d3 played, rook check, and now, well, this queen is looking pretty good here. We'll see, that's rather important in a second. Now, rook number 2 comes in. You know, when I look at this with a computer, then the computer tells me that if white plays the correct moves, then white should be able to defend this position. But in a practical game, this is terribly difficult, and with the pressure of these rooks, white is in terrible trouble. The knight came back to f2. Well, my computer tells me that knight d2 apparently is a better move, but I mean, this looks so unnatural actually. So I'm being interrupted here. We're in the middle of this hall, and there's all kinds of people wandering around. It's a very dynamic situation. So the knight, yeah, apparently according to the computer, the knight should come back here, although it doesn't look like a very stable square. Instead, white played, to my eyes, a much more natural move, knight f2, bringing the knight close to the king. But this looks very good for black now. And now there's actually no decent defence. And Bruthon cleaned up. And well, you can see that because the rook had to come over to defend the knight, this pawn on d6 is in trouble. And the game ended like this. After rook e8, well, one spike check. In fact, white's queen's lost. Excuse me. Dominguez drew on board 1. So Cuba won the match 3.5-half. Convincing victory. So Cuba were in the lead after round 6 together with Azerbaijan.